On this 70th episode of the Camp Owners Podcast, Howie and I chat with Jason Silberman, who is the director of Camp Matoka and owner in Maine, and also the president of CODA, the Camp Owners and Directors Association. We pick Jason's brain about issues that he thinks are on the mind of camp owners and directors across the country, things that they're going to be focusing on for the CODA-Con coming up in February of 2026. We also learned about his tear-stained letters to his parents as a camper and much more. Please take a listen, enjoy it, and learn along with us from Jason.
This is the Camp Owners Podcast from Go Camp Pro, exploring best practices and issues that professionals in the private camp industry face every day. You can find our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod.
Your staff work late into the night to create perfect camper schedules. Prevent midsummer burnout with Camptivities, the smart scheduling software that saves time, reduces mistakes, and keeps your team energized. Learn more at camptivities.com.
Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to discuss the big issues in the private camp world. Hello again, everybody. My name's Howie Grossinger, and I am the owner-director of Camp Robin Hood and Camp Walden in Ontario.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Schuna. I'm the co-owner and executive director of Hidden Pines Ranch, a day camp located in Stillwater, Minnesota. If you are looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. As always, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and other camp owners or people in your circle would love it, please send them a link to listen to us. Finally, want to thank Camptivities, the scheduling pros, and our good friend Ryan Rosen for keeping the lights on of this show and being an awesome sponsor for us. So, hi, Howie. How are you?
Hey, Kelly, I'm good. We're back.
We're back, baby. We're back.
Yeah,
I'm in my cozy fall gear. Here we
you are.
go.
Well, up in Canada, we have a hint of winter on the day of this recording, so I'll be shoveling after this call. That's for sure. But we are now deep into the preparatory phase of all of our lives. So, how's this part of the season treating you these days, Kelly?
To be real, I kind of get excited about this because outside projects are like the weather has said it's time to stop. And now it's time to look in or make things work with the weather. So I kind of like this part where camp, at least where we are in Minnesota, gets to go into a little hibernation. So I appreciate this time of year to be quite frank. So I'm ready. I'm ready just to talk camp and kind of think about let's turn the clock over, turn the calendar over for next year. So this is good.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm
For sure. Well,
excited.
I'm excited about this one too, Kelly. Do you want to introduce our guest?
Me too. Yes. So today we're thrilled to have Jason Silberman to the Camp Owners Podcast. He is the owner and director of Camp Matoka in Maine and currently serves as the president of CODA, the Camp Owners and Directors Association. So if you don't know what that is, look into it. We'll talk more about that later. But we're really excited to have him join us. We wanted Jason to be on here really just to kind of give us some inside experience and have the pulse on. That's a lot of pressure, Jason. Don't worry about that. You don't have to have the whole pulse, but we want a little bit of the pulse from you about, what's on camp owners' minds right now and what are they thinking about ending the year, going into a new year. So welcome to the show, Jason. We're really excited to have you.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here with both of you and celebrating your 70th episode. Congratulations to you both. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And your first podcast guest experience. So this is quite an honor for us as well. So that's exciting. We always start off our podcast with, having you just tell us a little bit about your camp story, your, camp origin story, how you got where you are now, and a little bit about your position at CODA.
Sure. So this is my 41st summer up in Maine. I started at 9 years old at Camp Matoka, which is a boys' camp on East Pond, and I was there for 19 years between camper, counselor, director, and then owner for 7 years. And then I moved over to Matoka after meeting my wife at a camp function. And we just celebrated our 21st summer of owning Matoka. We've got 3 kids. My middle child just finished her last summer at camp. So next summer will be the first summer that we'll have without having a child, a camper at camp. About 12 years ago, Fritz Seving from Camp Fernwood introduced to me the idea of joining CODA. He said, it'll it's a great organization. You'll sort of broaden your network, different perspectives from across the country, really smart people, low commitment, right? But we think it'd be great for you to do it. And I joined a while ago, and it's probably been one of the best decisions I've made in the camping industry. I'll say, aside from doing this podcast.
Nice one.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's good start to our conversation. Thanks for that introduction, Jason, because we meet so many people whose, the through line to so many of the stories that we hear from our guests is starting at camp when they were young and seeing this kind of evolution of the impact of camp. And obviously in your ownership space and now your leadership in CODA, we thought that this would be a good episode to dive into sort of from your perch as not only a camp owner, but in your role in CODA, just to talk about some of the hot topics, the things that are still on the minds of camp owners as we navigate year to year. And Kelly and I, came up with a few topics to discuss. And I think that, we know and we've agreed that like staffing continues to be sort of one of those ever present topics on the minds of camp owners. Maybe from your lens, not only as a camp owner yourself, but what the industry is going through. Maybe you can give us some insight on sort of what are the current things people are thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that staffing is definitely one of the toughest ongoing challenges for owners and directors. I do think that the camps that are finding success are the ones who are sort of rethinking or reframing the staff experience. So it's treating it, more as like a developmental opportunity, not just a summer job. So there's just, you've heard like transferable skills, 21st century skills. I think that they need to market their camps more along that line as opposed to just this is a summer job. I know firsthand camps across the country are leveraging their alumni networks, right? Matoka, we just had our 75th anniversary, and there was this sort of resurgence of campers and young staff that want to return for a summer. I think you're finding a lot of, camps that are trying to strengthen relationships with universities and colleges and schools. Money still plays a factor with these young adults. And so, referral incentives, I think are popular ways to attract, young talent, as long as they, fit within your mission and your culture. But I do see camps really investing in, keeping their staff happy and making sure they feel supported. And some of that is done by speakers, right? Mid-season speakers during the summer. Some of it's done with, recognition programs. But those are the camps that I think are going to be successful. You have to be nimble and you have to be willing to kind of pivot. So if you're a camp that historically have only had staff from the US and never really explored staff from overseas, it's worth it to see what that's about, because they do bring a different layer to your camp, different cultural layer, which I think is actually really important. But we're going to find that staff in the United States for a lot of camps are getting harder and harder to come by, particularly male staff for those all boys camps.
Why do you think that is, Jason, with the male staff in particular?
I think with a lot of the male staff, to be honest, I think a lot of it is they're used to, it may sound counterintuitive, but they're used to sort of being home in a particular network with a small group of friends, and sometimes leaving for a long time. And whether that's 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, just isn't popular. And I think that the length of time really becomes more of an issue than anything. I think that you're finding camps that are now looking at 2 weeks as the new, half season. And that's something that everybody has to try to grapple with. But I would imagine that if you're struggling hiring male staff, could you get them for a 2-week opportunity to work at your camp as opposed to a 6 or 7 week? Absolutely.
So you think some camp, I was just gonna say, so you think some camps are going more to that model of a partial season commitment come up for 4 weeks? Like they're dividing up summer with staff. Is that kind of what you're seeing a little bit? Is people trying that?
I think the a la carte option is where camps are going if you're struggling with attracting campers. If you're in a position where your camp is full year in and year out, and you're one of those camps, you just stick with what you're doing, and you don't have to worry about it, to be honest with you. But if you are a camp that is, struggling in terms of enrollment dipping, I certainly think that there is a entire market that is hungry for a 1 week or a 2 week option. But, most camp owners and directors, are traditionalists. And so, I grew up going to camp, and I went to an 8 week camp and a 4 week camp, and slowly went to a 7 week camp and a 4 week camp. And now we're 6.5 and 3. So, and we've said we're putting the brakes on it. We're not going beyond 3 weeks, but it's easy for me to say that today. 2, 3 years from now, if I was struggling getting, 3 week campers, I would be changing my view. And I'd say, what do I have to do to fill my camp? I think, you have to look at it as a business. And if you want to survive and thrive, you have to be nimble and pivot if needed.
And I think that we've explored like two very distinct things. On the one hand, this last part of the conversation talked about, maybe reframing our offerings to attract and keep our beds full, or, the bums on the seat for the buses at day camp, if that's what you do. But I want to touch on just so many of the good things you mentioned on the staffing piece. I think, Jason, it's our experience. I know Kelly and I've talked to lots of people. We've talked amongst ourselves, is that we have to sell the staff experience in our programs with the same vigor that we are selling the camper experience, because we're really selling this commitment for long-term employment after you've been a college student for 8 months and then saying hello to your parents and then leaving for 8 months. We used to have, and I think we can all speak to, Jason, I'm sure you're someone who went through part of your career where you had 5th-year staff, 6-year staff. And we're finding, and I'm curious about you, like the shelf life of a staff member is getting shorter and shorter because of what I would say would be outside influences or pressures that staff are feeling, whether they be male or female. Are you feeling some of that too, in terms of retaining some of your staff year to year?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, it's a transient position.
Sure.
So, they're going to come and go. The goal is for us to try to convince a lot of these staff that think that they're only going to do this for one summer, that you'll come back for at least one more summer. And then it's, oh, we got you for 2 summers. Maybe you'll come back for a third. I find that the staff who have CIT, junior counselor, LIT, whatever you want to call that program, from 16 to 18, that's a good feeder, right? For your camps. Now, there are some camps like myself that we say that the youngest staff member has to be 19. Okay. So when my campers end at 15, they can't come back until they're 19. Some people look at that and say there's a flaw in that, right? Because you've basically let your campers leave to experience something else, and who knows if they're going to come back. What we realize is, you get about a third of those kids back. Okay. And to me, those are the ones that are most dedicated and committed. I also think that there's a higher expectation from parents today, and having 16, 17, maybe 18-year-olds care for your children is not, is a little bit more challenging than it was 20 years ago. Right. I think there's much higher expectation for parents in terms of how are you going to care for my child? And I think it's easier for a camp to say, we have adults, right? We have people that don't live at home. They're 19, they're 22, they're 23. These are people that can handle problems that come their way. And so I think that there's a social piece to that that's, that can't be overlooked.
For sure. And I think that each of us in the industry are doing, our own soul searching for, sort of that right formula for that type of thing. And, I think in the day camp space, which some of us occupy, especially particularly in this call, like, we're looking at, daycare options for families in day camp. So they look to that. So I think we're all looking at different ways to fit the staffing puzzle for sure. I'm wondering, I'm also curious about the staff piece as it relates to the mental health resourcing that we're doing today, the challenges that we face to support staff in-house as they're with us doing a very huge job of taking care of other people's children, but we want to support them in the best way possible. What have you found at your own camp, or what is the conversation in the industry, do you think, about those mental health supports over the last few years, particularly post-COVID?
Sure. I think an area of topic that we know that our members focus on is, the mental, emotional, social health. Last year, we had Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, speak at our conference. This year, we're going to have Jean Twenge, who's written iGen and focuses on, kind of different generations, Alpha versus Gen Z. So I think people are always intrigued and interested. They're putting, the mental, emotional, social health at the center of their culture. I think staff need to hear that. They need to feel that they're being supported. And so, owners and directors are spending just as much time on that piece as they are with their programming, right? So you're seeing more intentionality when it comes to staff training and partnerships with mental health professionals, right? And you're seeing clearer systems, for identifying and responding to like camper and staff needs. They need to know exactly what they need to do and who they need to go to. So, what I've seen is, you could say a major investment in staff readiness, right? Equipping your staff with, I'd say, the practical skills to support campers, but also maintaining their own well-being, right? So camps can't and shouldn't expect seasonal staff to be clinicians. They just can't do that. So what camps are doing, we're doing it as well, is you're leveraging partnerships with social workers, with psychiatrists, with therapists. So camps can, sort of sustain a high level of care with their kids without overextending their staff. And the burnout of the staff is a major concern of all, camp owners and directors. It's such an intense environment.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things for us, that goes day camp, overnight camp, all the things. And even at day camp, we see it of just more and more of staff feeling burnt out from managing kids' behavior. Like that is one of the biggest things. It's just, all types of behaviors, right? But I just think that is the thing that I continue to see staff wanting more and more and more support on, is supporting campers in different types of behaviors. And, thinking back, I've been having this conversation with some of my leadership team, as our leadership team just continues to grow and grow, it feels like. Our seasonal leadership team, like I just had a conversation with a couple of us that used to do it. We had lunch and they have babies now, and we're like, how did we do it? We're like, how did we do it? There was 4 or 5 of us in an admin and we killed it. Like we had great synergy, but I also think, they're just, the needs continue to grow and the counselors continue to need us more to support campers. So I just think that's an interesting, I don't have a solution, but it definitely feels like it's on the mind of, feels like you grow your team, but you're just, doesn't feel like enough still sometimes. So what are those camper needs and what's the best way to address them? But I think it relates to also how teachers feel in schools. I think teachers feel like they're playing many, many, many hats and not just a teacher anymore. And so, like you said, Jason, your counselors are not mental health providers, or they can't handle it all, but where do they draw the line, or how do you give them the support they need? And when is it above what they're capable of? I don't know. I just think it's an interesting, again, don't have an answer, but it's been on my mind when I talk to other camp people as well.
But one of the things that we've done, which has helped our staff, because we created a playbook, but they have to read the playbook. And we actually had, exactly that. Here's the terminology of what you say. it didn't go, it didn't work the way we wanted it to work. So we partnered with a company out of New York, and they're professional actors and actresses who come and they stay in character and they talk to you about what are the 3, 4, 5 issues that you want to deal with. And what we found for our staff is, a lot of them are visual learners. So for them to be able to engage in a discussion and watch one of their peers deal with an actor who stays in character the entire time, doesn't break character. How do you handle this issue? We found that with our, our surveys at the end of orientation, that was the most highly rated, I would say workshop that we had. So anytime it's hard to ask staff to role play. It's very difficult for them to do that. But if you can hire, professionals to come in and work in that space, it would be fantastic. And so that's something that we've done, and it's something we continue to do that, our staff find value in, and they actually thank us. I mean, think about that. They actually thank you at the end of the hour-long session and say, this was fantastic. We've learned so much, and, we're ready to apply these skills when we have our staff.
I'm smiling, Jason, because I think I used the exact same company for my 2 camps up here last year, and ditto plus multiple exclamation marks. It was probably the single most valuable staff training experience I've heard about in the last several years. It was very real. And I agree with you, Jason. If camps can make that investment to do that, there was an energy that came out of those sessions that allowed staff to see the role that they're about to play and equip them with language and skills and a sense of, hey, I can do this. And it was really good. So I'm really glad you brought up that example, because we did something very similar just last summer, and I have a feeling it was the same group. But it was really super valuable whenever you can. I mean, they don't want to hear from Howie to talk about, after so many years about what you do in this situation when a kid doesn't want to play with the group. But when we can talk about those through the eyes of an actor and a professional, and it's someone from outside, it makes a huge difference. So totally endorse that. I'm glad you brought that up for sure.
Yeah, so, and then one other thing I'd mention, Kelly, is that, I'll speak from myself and my camp. You mentioned your leadership team is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Ours is as well. And we've noticed a dramatic increase in our staff budget because we're hiring adults, we're hiring professionals. We're not paying to have, older kids watch younger kids. It's just not what we're doing. So there has to be an investment in your staff, because you want to have adults watching these children and really giving you want to coach. One of the things that I was always taught was staff orientation isn't, you don't learn everything in staff orientation. In staff orientation, you learn the policies, the guidelines, the expectations of what the camp is about. And then when the kids come, that's when the real training begins. So you have to use, you've got to coach and connect with the staff throughout the course of the summer. It can't just end when the kids come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I thought at CODA last year was interesting how they have the stats. I think you did like the stats and what people are spending on staffing and your payroll. And Howie was doing some research, but, knowing that your payroll is continuing to grow, and that is one of the biggest expenses. So do you have to cut down in other places? Are camps having to take down, reduce expenses in other places to make sure that payroll is high? Because if you want those seasonal teachers or whoever that seasonal leadership is, you have to be, I think, competitive. Yes, we have all the great things of camp, but that payroll needs to be a major, major decision to, support those leadership team that you want to keep coming back and not saying no to just the summer and do something else or take the summer off or whatever it is what their career is.
Right. So the easiest place for me to say for a camp to, find that money, and as hard as it is for me to say this because I'm addicted to capital improvements, that's where you have to you say, okay, I have to reduce the amount of money I'm putting into my camp from a capital perspective. And I'm going to put a portion of that into, paying staff. And I think that's one of the things that we've done. And as hard it is for me, because I love building and I love always having new stuff for the kids and for the staff, I realize that we have to pay people what they what they deserve. And it's a hard job.
It's
Mhm.
a hard job, and it's the stuff that, I mean, the big toy, the big improvement, all that stuff, sometimes, as we raise fees annually, that's the stuff that our families see, right? They don't necessarily see the fact that we've invested in this person and that person or that piece of infrastructure. So finding the right balance to commit our budgets to the quality of staff that we want, but also feeling in many ways, which I think camp owners do, is that part of the justification of fees going up every year is parents want to see something new, kids want to see things new. And I agree, Jason. I think striking that balance is an annual challenge. But at the end of the day, I think parents just want the best people taking care of their kids. And that's a great story to tell about how we're doing that each and every year through the way we train, etc.
As a camp owner, you know your operational staff are the heartbeat of your program. They're the ones who would bleed for camp, staying up way too late, night after night, to make sure every camper gets a great schedule. Camptivities gives them their evenings back. Their software builds schedules around your camp's unique rules, saving time, cutting mistakes, and keeping your most dedicated people happy, energized, and ready to give campers the best summer ever. Camptivities does it all for camps. Auto-scheduling for staff, campers, groups, manual adjustments, over 70 reports for rosters and data analysis, tons of customizable settings, and so much more. Schedule smarter at camptivities.com. Don't wait until the new year. Now's the time to find a better way to schedule and save 15% for the first year. Camptivities would love to show you the next big thing in camp. Visit camptivities.com to set up a time to chat. Let Camptivities help you get away from your desk and back out to camp.
I want to move away a little bit from the staffing conversation, and as you personally as a camp operator, but also in your role in CODA, how much is your group thinking about where technology and innovation are fitting into the industry, and how are you shaping that kind of professional development into the work that you do at CODA, but also within your own operation? Maybe some thoughts on, we're hearing a lot about AI and how it may influence what we're doing as camp operators. I'm not so sure it's going to take over, but there are definitely aspects of it that we can benefit from. What are your thoughts on technology and innovation as it relates to the industry?
And my thoughts are that, the camps that the camps that are going to do the best are the ones that are going to use technology to support people, not to replace what we're doing. You've got to keep relationships and your community at sort of the heart of what you do, right? That's sort of why these kids come back year after year. I think AI is going to change the way we run camp. We're going to have someone speaking, probably more than one person speak at this conference, CODACon, on artificial intelligence. I do think that there are advantages. You want to leverage technology when you can leverage it to make things easier for you, right? We were talking before this aired about scheduling, right? There's the web-based scheduling systems that, you can automate messages to parents. I think part of what we do has to always be this personal touch, right? I think that's what's unique about what we do. So I'm always a little weary of automated messages going to my camp families, because I think they then feel like they're just a number and not a person. Okay. I do think that you can use AI to help hire and sort of, reframe a lot of the guidelines and, procedures that you have in place and edit. I think that's great. It'll help for smoother registration, right? I mean, I think for me, when I open up my enrollment, I don't want there to be a hurdle, right? You want it to be super easy for these parents to just click and sign. So I do think that AI is here. It's going to be helping us. I do think a lot of our providers are going to be leveraging, whether it's your payroll provider, whether it's your scheduling platform provider, camp management provider, they're all leveraging AI, as they should, right? That's gonna help us run better camps. But I do, I do worry about how far it goes, right? I do think that, do you want, where do you want technology to enter your camp? And, we're the type of camp where, we make sure that we have, fiber coming in. I want to make sure that I've got access to, my platform via my phone or my computer. I want to have backups. so that if I have a power outage, my generator turns on so that I'm not disconnected from my camp families. There are all these things that you need to think about that you probably have thought about, but now it's becoming clearer and clearer because of things that happen. People, not to pivot away from this topic, but, think about the flooding that happened in Texas, right? You have camps now that are going to be required to install these real-time weather alert stations. And these are like $40,000, $50,000. These aren't like cheap, inexpensive systems, right? I mean, you need to think about robust communication for your camp. And so I do think that these are a lot of topics that are great for us to discuss. And I know that in February, we're going to have two people that are experts in this field, and not just, hey, this is how you use ChatGPT, and it's beyond, right? This is how AI can help you run a better camp, and things that things that you should be doing if you're not doing it already.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That came up in our Northland ACA meeting we just had about like policy. So you said, like, I think that's a way that camps can use AI, as there is renewed or a focus on like, what is your policies for weather and what is your communication? And a lot of camps were like, where do you even start with writing a policy? How do you know if it's good? And so I think that's one way that AI could impact that. But are you hearing that also from, camps about that, need to focus on what is your emergency preparedness? What are your policies? What is your communication tools? Is that something that's on? I imagine it is, but is it also something that you're hearing in the CODA-verse? That's my new term. That people are thinking about.
Yeah, no, I do, because we represent camps across the country. When something happens in Texas or something happens in another part of the state, it impacts all of us. I mean, we're all concerned about it. And to be honest with you, when there was the flooding in Texas, I was getting parents contacting me. My camp is in Maine. I'm not in a flood zone, but they want to know what your emergency action plans are. And you can't just say, we have a plan. That can't be it anymore, right? It's got to be, here's what it covers. Here's how we train for it. Here's how we'll execute it, right? So the expectations, I think, have gotten dramatically higher because the stakes are higher. You're taking care of someone else's child for the summer. I always say to my staff, there's no greater responsibility than taking care of someone else's child. And so, why would we be negligent to not explore all, possible issues, right? Whether weather related, right? Anything that could potentially impact our camp, our campers, our staff. I think we owe it to our camp families, to the industry, to go through everything exhaustively to make sure we really are thinking of everything. You never want to be caught flat-footed.
For sure.
So what would
And
you
we're and
say?
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Howie, just had a quick question. For people listening, let's say they're new camp owners, new camp directors, when they have that question of how are you writing these policies? What are people in the camp role, as a seasoned veteran, both of you, what would you say to them? Like, how are people knowing what to write for good policies? Are they using other camp experts or owners, or I guess that's a question that was on people's mind is, I'm new to this and I want to do a good job. How do I write a good policy, or how do I know if my policy is good? Yes, you have your ACA standards that you take obviously into account, or in the OCA, but what would you say to those people that are like, what are my resources, or how do I write a good policy?
I mean, if you're a new camp director that's coming in, my hope is that, the camp director that you are, taking over from, they have good policies in place for you, right? I mean, I think we're all at a point where we should have all these policies laid out pretty clearly. But I do think that, kind of swinging back to artificial intelligence, I do think that you can, use AI to help you develop those policies and procedures, but it's not cut paste, right? It's use it to kind of get a framework, and then in your own voice, right? Take a look at, your own facility, right? Your grounds, the topography, the lake, where you're situated, and try to massage in your own camp. And then what I would do is I would talk to your peers, right? And that's one of the benefits of CODA, right? I mean, it's this kind of, you know, it's this kind of collaborative network of camps across the country. So for me to develop a weather policy, I'm going to reach out to my friend in Texas or Wisconsin or Minnesota or Florida, right? And I'm going to say, hey, what do you think about this? And they just have a different perspective than simply me contacting the people in my region. I love the people in my region. They're great. They run some of the best camps. But I also think one of the reasons why I joined CODA and why I'm in the position I'm in is because I love hearing from different people across the country, different perspectives. And I think that, you get a much richer experience. And so my advice to a new camp director would be use technology. We think that's great, but also talk to your peers and join an organization where you can say, hey, what do you think of this policy? I'd love your input. And, I think one of the things about this industry that's different than a lot of others is just the transparency. We're open with each other. We're not hiding anything from each other. We shouldn't view each other as competitors. We're working together for the common goal of giving kids an incredible camp experience.
Yep. And there's lots of kids to go around.
There's lots of kids to go around.
Lots of kids to go around. I feel you said it really well, Jason. You took the words right out of my mouth. And as someone from Canada, Ontario, where private camps, flourish here, I've always found the value of reaching out and attending CODA events, just the networking and all that stuff. And as up here, last couple of years, we've been dealing with some serious air quality issues, and we've had to rethink sort of the impact of fires in Canada coming across the country and all those things and the smoke and whether you're day or overnight camp. So I think that a constant reassessment, and often, sadly, the events of Texas make us rethink that, unfortunately, that we have to constantly keep those things on our radar for sure. My quick anecdote, just back to innovation, is that my site manager who operates 4 large pools on my day camp property can now on his phone see how all the chlorination is going. So this technology, but as we know in the world of camp, getting your site manager to embrace technology can sometimes be difficult, but I'm grateful that I have one that doesn't mind using his phone for that. But it's everywhere, and I think we owe it to ourselves to continue to explore how those efficiencies can totally be made. What do you think is happening these days on regulatory issues impacting? I know it's typically down in the States, it's state by state, but what's your sense, Jason, about the impact regulation, whether it be employment or environmental or things, I know the ACA has a strong or attempts to do some great lobbying, but from a CODA perspective, what are your thoughts on, generally speaking, regulation and the conversations that are happening with camp owners?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a unique position, because a lot of states have organizations and have lobbyists and lobbyists that advocate and protect their camps on their behalf. So, we're here as a national organization, and we can simply, be nimble and galvanize quickly if needed, right? And I think it's important for us to be able to disseminate and share information, because when you go to CODACon, for example, we give a report, and I think it's nice for owners and directors to see what struggles, right, from a legislative matter, camps from California are dealing with, and, camps from Florida or Maine, right, or the flyover states. So I think that it's important for us to, know that legislation is going to impact all of us, in slightly different ways. If you're out in California, you've got issues with, fires, but you also have issues with insurance. Just, as far as getting insurance, I mean, that's a big problem if you're out in California. I think that insurance companies are going to, kind of look at ways for us to, hey, what do you deal with? How are you dealing with potential storms or floods? How are you dealing with power outages? I just spent $200,000 on 2 ponds for the potential 100-year storm, right? But I have to do that because I'm mandated to do that by the state, right? If I want to continue to to expand and do things with my camp. So I think that you're going to see that camps are going to be now required to do a lot of things they haven't done in the past. There's going to be more stringency, right, put on summer camps, whether it's relocating structures, right, that were in high risk zones to different areas. We talked about it earlier, the installation of the real-time weather alert systems. I'm not even mandated to do that. And I'm exploring that for my camp because I feel like that's the prudent thing to do, right? You're going to find that the states are going to require more detailed emergency action plans, which we talked a little bit more about. There's actually a bill in Texas, okay, that would remove the ability for camps to immediately correct a violation during an inspection process. Okay. This is how things are moving. Okay. So, you want to be engaged in the process. You want to know what's going on. If you are a part of a state that has an organization and a strong lobbying group, that's wonderful. And you're doing exactly what you should be doing because you need to protect, we need to protect our industry.
Tell me about that Texas bill one more time. Will you tell me again what that is?
So there's a bill in Texas that would remove the ability for camps to immediately correct violations during a inspection process. So they could close you down, essentially is what they're saying. Okay.
Wow.
So this is, I can only speak for my state. Maine's underfunded. You get inspected every other year if you get inspected. Right. It's not a given, but there are other states every year they're inspected. So, there are variables that each state has to work with. But legislation is going to be, something that we all deal with. And unfortunately, what's going to happen is for many of us, it's going to actually hit our bottom line, too, because there are things we're going to be forced to do and pay for that we weren't in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting thing. My husband's in the long-term care industry, and that's when they get surveyed, they get put into immediate jeopardy. Like they can't just fix things when there's an issue. So that's an interesting legislative connection there. So
Mm-hmm.
good to know. Good to know. Can we talk about before we wrap up, just talking about the future just of camp ownership, and there's obviously like succession planning and some camps are staying, within families. There is some consolidation happening in the camp industry. Really a lot of things for independent camp owners to think about. I think that's interesting. I didn't know in your story that you were was it Manitou, Camp
Yep.
Manitou? And then, so that's a whole nother conversation. But I didn't know that you were at Manitou and it sounded like you owned that, moved over to
Yep.
so it's interesting. That just speaks to some of those issues or changes that can happen. So, do you have any advice for independent camp owners just thinking about succession, sale, those kind of things?
And if I could just
Oh, yeah.
add, also, Kelly, we have a lot of listeners who want to make this their life work and want to get into ownership. And I think an aspect of this conversation to close out is, Jason's been part of different ownership groups, independent with people, et cetera. Just this idea of, people who want to get in to the ownership game and just some general thoughts on that, Jason, before we wrap up.
Sure. I mean, I guess my advice to independent camp owners would be to start talking about the future early, right? I mean, I'm 50 and I probably have, 15, 20 years where I feel like I can do this at the same level I'm doing it now, but I'm already thinking about what's my, not my succession plan. We talked a little, I mean, I've been doing this, I've been in this area in Maine for over 40 years, right? This is my life. And so it's my legacy. And what kind of legacy do I want to leave? And so when I explore the idea of selling camp, I think about putting myself in a position of strength. So what does that mean? It means, I'm going to learn from other camp owners who have sold camps, how they've sold camps. I'm going to kind of think about what my preferred path is, meaning, am I selling to one of my kids, right? Am I selling to somebody within my camp community, right, who's talked to me about, we all have those staff and campers that say, we wish we could do what you do, partnering with another camp, exploring private equity, because that seems to be involved in everything we do these days, right? The worst approach for someone is to make a decision under pressure. And so for me, to be able to say, hey, at 50, I've got time. And maybe when I'm 55, I want to do something, right? So what's my plan at that point? So my perspective would be that, you want to focus early. You want to have open dialogues about what your goals are. If your goal is to keep the legacy of camp going on, then you're less concerned about the bottom line. It's just simple as that. I mean, you just are. If you're concerned about the bottom line, then you may not be as concerned about the legacy because you can't control that. And so whoever you sell that camp to, it may not be what you remember it to be. And that's just business. That's just what happens. So there's kind of a fine line. I don't that we look at our camps. A lot of us don't look at camps as businesses, although we should. But when it comes to sale, it's emotional, right? Because this is a part of who you are, what you've created. And so do you just turn around and say, okay, I'm going to sell it to the highest bidder, or I'm going to sell it to a staff member that's been with me for 20 years who, has a wonderful family and we think they can do an incredible job, living the same values and beliefs that we did. And if that's the case, then it's worth me giving a discounted price and acting as a bank, right? Because they're not going to have the resources necessarily to do that. There's a whole host of decisions that go into this, but I think it kind of depends on what's the legacy you want to leave behind.
Well said, Jason. So many good things there for people to think about. And I think that, for myself, I'm a little older. These are things we're starting to ask questions about with my partners, with our family. And we've all seen examples of people who these plans have delayed them to the point where, they felt that pressure and that they were making decisions they could have made differently had they thought about it even 5 years earlier, kind of thing. So a really good way to end this excellent discussion about CODA, about your experience as a camp operator. And we wanted, before we get into the last part of our episode, we wanted to give you an opportunity to give a little plug for CODA and CODACon and all the good stuff that your group is doing. So please tell us more about what's happening in February.
Yeah. So CODA's, it's a, it's a wonderful organization where you have camps from across the country that come together. We provide 2 opportunities for owners and directors to meet in person. And I think that's, what's really special about what we do. One is in the fall, and we were just in Wayne County and visited 5 camps. And it gives not only an opportunity to visit the camps, but it gives you an opportunity to network and mingle and, build relationships with camp owners, directors, but also business members who support us, right? And then we've got our conference. Our conference precedes ACA National. It's in San Diego this year. And, we've got 3 keynote speakers that have very distinct tracks. One is, Ron Insana, who's talking about the economy, and he's on CNBC and, a finance guru. You've got Gene Twangy, who's talking about mental health and sort of where we are with this generation. And then you've got Michael Smerconish, who is really talking about community and connection. So I think, what we try to do is we try to bring in speakers who people really want to listen to, who have a message, who you can take valuable, tangible things with you back. But it's also about socially connecting with each other, right? Mingling, which is a big part of our conference. So the social events are great. The breakouts that we offer are really informative. And so, I think it's unlike any conference that people have gone to. So if you haven't had an opportunity to explore CODACon, I don't know why you wouldn't come to San Diego.
I don't know either. I don't know either.
I don't know either.
I don't know either. Get with the people. No, I'm kidding. It is great. And I think the speakers are top notch. Top notch. You can't resist when you see who's speaking. So that's awesome, Jason. Right before we wrap up and ask how people can get a hold of you, we have a couple of rapid fire Brene Brown type questions that we need to ask you. They're very campy. So are you ready for these?
Let's do it.
Okay, great. What's your favorite camp meal? Best thing that you love at camp?
Chili bread bowls.
Oh,
They're very good.
Wow, that sounds delicious. If you could lead any program area at your camp, what would it be?
Basketball.
Oh, I'm learning so much about you. S'mores, burnt or golden brown?
Golden brown.
Oh, yep. No carcinogens for you. Okay.
Nope.
As a camper, were you like you missed home very much so, or were you like, peace out, bye, I'm gone?
So
For the
my
summer?
wife and I had something very much in common. When we were both kids at camp, she was at Matoka, I was at Manitou. We were both homesick kids, and we both sent our parents letters where we circled our tears because we missed them so much. So I was a homesick kid for a period of time.
I have to ask, where are you in the birth order?
I'm an identical twin, so I am in the middle.
Oh,
I have an older brother, and then I have my twin brother. I'm 15 minutes older than my twin brother.
Jason, I'm
nice.
learning so many
Two-
exciting things about you.
Wow.
That's cool.
15 minutes.
15 minutes that you can hold that. And then last two, as a camp pro, where are you happiest? In your office, taking care of business, or being out in the action?
No, being outside with the kids. That's
Okay.
what I love.
Yep. And then lastly, favorite camp song?
Can I give you two songs?
Yes.
Sure.
I'm gonna say Wagon Wheel, Darius Rucker, and I'm gonna say Bruno Mars. We sing a song every Friday night, which is Count on Me, Bruno Mars. So it's a sweet song that just means a lot to me, but there's no question. I actually play guitar, not very well, but I can play Wagon Wheel, and I love playing
Oh my
in
gosh.
front of our kids.
We're kindred spirits, Jason. My whole camp, they put it on like, yes, I'm with you, man.
It's great.
I love
Well done.
it.
Great
Oh,
song.
thank you. That was
This
fun.
is good. This was
got to know camp
actually
with Jason.
Jason's one of the, no disrespect to the other guests. This was a real great exchange of ideas on these questions. Really, really good, Jason. Top notch. Well done. Are you a Boston
thank
Bruins
you.
fan? Are you a Boston Bruins fan?
I'm actually from Philadelphia originally, so not.
You're a Flyers fan?
I'm more Flyers, more Eagles, more Sixers. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
I want to commend both of you because you made this very easy for me. As I said when we started, I tend to be, my father-in-law was an accountant, and when he used to speak to people, he always preferred speaking to, he was a dental accountant. He always preferred speaking to dentists, not accountants. I enjoy speaking to campers and parents and staff, not camp owners, because I feel like you're always being judged. But I did not feel that in this. I felt very comfortable from the moment we started. So thank you both.
Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate you. This is the time of our show as we wrap up to ask how people can get a hold of you. If they want to connect, what is the best way that people can connect with Jason Silberman?
So I created a CODA email, but which is jason@coda.camp. So people can try me there. But everyone emails me at jason@matoka.com, and it's MATOAKA.com. So those are the ways to reach me, jason@coda.camp or jason@matoka.camp.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Matoka.com, sorry.
Yes, matoka.com. Amazing. Kelly Schuna.
Best way is Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com. What about you,
Amazing.
Howie?
Well, you can reach me at Howie at camprobinhood.ca. Yes, Canadian flag. So reach me at .ca. Thanks to our sponsor, Camptivities. We really appreciate the crew at Camptivities and all the support they give us to do this show. Please don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff there from not only our show, but the other amazing Go Camp Pro podcasts out there. We hope you enjoyed this. Jason from Camp Matoka and CODA, really appreciate your time and this amazing conversation. Thanks for listening, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you once again on the Camp Owners Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Camp Owners Podcast. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review on Apple Music or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, you can find our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. The Camp Owners Podcast is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Find a podcast for camp pros of every age and stage at gocamp.pro/podcast. Hey, camp pros. We love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, if you've gotten even one good idea from a Go Camp Pro podcast, a masterclass, from the Summer Camp Pros group on Facebook, at a conference, or wherever else, we ask that you give credit where credit is due. That way, we can encourage camp pros to keep freely sharing their brilliant ideas and make the camp industry better. Thanks very much.